Under your chin.
Morning, comrades! Well, I have this task here to share a brief summary considering the entire afternoon that we have worked yesterday. So it's important to highlight that we have a lot of comrades working to taking notes, coordinating all the process. So, of course, after all this Dilemmas of Humanity here conference, we're gonna share the more detailed synthesis and information about all of it. So here my task is to share some of the common ideas that we have identified with this team of that are taking notes, and also the comrades that are coordinating each one of the seminars, okay? So we have a lot of work considering that each one of the countries here after the conference need to understand how these ideas that we are discussing here can mobilize, strengthen our struggle in each one of the countries in unity with left-wing organizations, with people's organizations, with socialist organizations in our country. So the main task here with Dilemmas is to share common ideas, understand what can unite us to strengthen our struggles in our national level, in our countries. So the main task that our organizations have more than participate and attend this amazing conference, is also to mobilize and move forward with this political agenda in each one of the countries. So let's go just to this brief resume. So these struggles to satisfy basic rights, goods, and service are rich areas for the construction of socialism, but they must all be understood as political projects. Resolving the deep issues that lead to the unmet needs of the majority of the people require long processes of transformation that can only advance with organization and clear understanding that no durable solutions can be found in the current system. Satisfying needs is insufficient to develop lasting change. People must be active participants in building the solutions that satisfy their needs and be agents in building the alternatives that will overcome their hunger, illness, homelessness, or criminalization. So here about the topic of food sovereignty. The land question is central to development of forms of agriculture that are more in harmony with the environment and the needs of the people. Access to land, water, and the many resources that are necessary to farming are indispensable to develop agroecological farming. Developing a different approach to the model that is centered around the profit of multinationals is a political project. There are a diversity of experience from social movements and progressive governments that provide concrete and specific alternatives. They are all important, but they all require organization and a political project to advance. An alternative system is an urgent and pressing need. Hunger will only be eradicated under a different system, and food sovereignty is the necessary approach to overcome the current system. Now about the health seminar. Addressing the health needs is a matter of adopting different principles that those that are in a place today. Trading the pursuit of profit for a process that is focused on care. Community organizations in popular communities have the ability to address the medical and care needs locally if they are organized to do so and move by the principle of solidarity and care. The approach to medical care must also understand that health is determined by social factors that clinics alone cannot address, and therefore integrating health with struggle to change the conditions that create poor health are important. Healthcare workers are acutely aware of the incapacity of profit-driven medical care to provide for the needs of patients. For this reason, the organization of healthcare workers in trade unions can be advance a progressive agenda, as those providing care are in a position to propose and demand change that are much needed. Now about the summary about housing seminar. The dilemma of housing extends beyond shelters and embodies a fundamental facet of human existence. Access to proper housing is intricately linked to the exercise of one's human right to dignity, without which individuals are excluded from essential public service and educational opportunities. Inadequate housing prompts broader struggles to access electricity, water, food, healthcare, education, and communication. We need militant social movements that can reach those without housing in our societies, because this is a historically unorganized group whose interests intersect with all dilemmas under capitalism. And now the seminar on immigration. Most immigration is the product of imperialism and the continuation of colonial paradigms that continue to characterize many countries of the global north. Migration today is a huge phenomenon, and it is not the case that migrants are only moving from the global south to the global north. There is a lot of interregional migration. Immigration has two dimensions which must be contemplated: the effect and reality of immigrants. Migration has two dimensions which must be contemplated: the effect and reality of immigrants in the countries that have left, but also in the countries where they have arrived. Improving economic conditions and security of countries in the global south is the only way to address migration. This is abundantly clear, and only a transition from capitalism can truly transform conditions. Until we are able to change the conditions of people who migrate in their home country, we must deal with the reality of migrants in the countries they migrate to. It is essential that we make efforts to organize them and take their struggle for legalization as a priority. It is equally important that we battle the ideas of the extreme right, which criminalize migrants and divide the working class. Those are the summary of the discussion yesterday, comrades.
Sorry, I've just lost my papers. So, Israela, Israela, Israela. Israela, 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 Israela. Thanks, comrades. Amandla! My apologies, the last speaker just ran away with my speaking notes. So as we start, thank you very much, Comrade Giovanni. I mean, this is what the work we're doing. This is what it comes down to. So thank you so much. Can we give him a round of applause? Thank you very much. With that said, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Zazin Sibanyoni Mugambi. I work for NUMSA as the head of secretariat. I also work in an international office. I'm also a member of the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party in South Africa. So thank you very much. And I've got a wonderful panel with me today. I've got Theodora Pius, who's the National Network of Farmers Groups Viwata, Tanzania. Welcome, comrade. I've also got Tinde Singh Panwa. If I butcher your names, you'll correct me as I go along. Cities of Inclusive, Transformative, Yarrow, Zing, and Environmental Nuanced Sustainability of India. I've also have Hosseini Khili, who's at the Nomad Association of Tunisia. I also have Carlos Barrentos, who's a committee for the peasant unity in Guatemala. Let's welcome our panelists today. Thank you very much for joining us. Comrades, as I start, I'd just like to open this up by just sharing some of my own thoughts and the NUMSA's thoughts on this topic of defending life and defending nature. The capitalist world and the system of imperialism are threatening to completely destroy both nature and all life, not just human life, but all life on Earth. Today, we live in times where global ecological disasters, pandemics, and the nuclear Third World War are not just possibilities. They can happen, and they will happen, and they are happening, unless the world working class, poor rural populations, indigenous people, and their progressive socialist organization win the struggle to defeat capitalism, imperialism, and establish socialism. We cannot address the climate crisis without getting to the root cause of environmental degradation, and these are capitalism and imperialism. Comrades, capitalism and imperialism exploit and oppress people. This means that we simply cannot trust these same exploiters and oppressors to treat our environment in a sustainable way, when all that they seek to do is maximize power and maximize profit. It is our task at this conference, which is concerned with constructing socialism, to put forward a socialist answer to this question of sustainability. The socialist answer must depart from the recognition that much of the development of the global north was historically the product of an active underdevelopment of the global south. For example, the capitalist development of the global north has consumed more than 80% of the world's carbon budget. On what fair basis will we then decide how the 20% or so balance is allocated? In international law, principles of common but differentiated responsibility should be the center of our approach. We must contribute in ways that commiserate with our respective capabilities and levels of development. We have to ask ourselves, can we solve the climate change crisis by deepening unemployment and poverty and inequality? In South Africa, we find ourselves grappling with how do we prioritize climate change and mitigate and adapt when we are daily faced with deepened levels of poverty, inequality, and unemployment? Then how should we defend life and goods and nature in a way that contributes to the struggle of socialism? And to answer these questions, these pertinent questions, I'll now introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker today is Theodora Pius. She is the head of programs for the National Network of Farmers Groups of Tanzania, MVIWATA, an activist of the World March of Women in Tanzania, and an advocate for agroecology. Welcome, comrade.
Theodora. Lower your mic below your chin. There you go.
Greetings, comrades. Amandla. Afrika moja. Afrika moja. Afrika kijamaa. So it's a Swahili greeting meaning one Africa, free Africa, socialist Africa. Afrika moja. Afrika kijamaa. So as I was introduced, my name is Theodora from MVIWATA, mtandao wa vikundi vya wakulima Tanzania. That's basically the name of the organization that I'm coming from, and in English can be translated as National Network of Smallholder Farmers Groups in Tanzania, the largest farmers organization in Tanzania, which started in 1993, and currently has its membership in all regions of Tanzania, both the mainland and in Zanzibar. So I'll be sharing on the topic as I was introduced, that is defending life and nature. And literally I'll be based on the experiences that we have from the organization that I'm coming from, but also from the struggle that connects other organizations that are similar to what my organization is doing, and that is in agriculture. And to begin with, my organization is a member of La Via Campesina, which is a global movement for peasant movements, peasants organization, landless movements, and currently we are hosting the regional office for La Via Campesina, Southern and Eastern Africa. So the regional office for La Via Campesina is hosted by MVIWATA in Tanzania. And first allow me, before anything else, to extend the greetings from smallholder farmers in Tanzania to all of you. And when I speak of smallholder farmers, perhaps apart from many other places in Africa, we have a very great connection to smallholder farmers because in most of the states or the countries in Africa, they are the largest working population. In Tanzania, for example, 7% of the working population are peasants. And when I say peasants, like those who are found in villages, in rural areas, and we know the situation in rural areas in most of the places in Africa and other parts of the world. So I extend the solidarity greetings to the people of Palestine, people of Zimbabwe, people of Sahrawi, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and many other parts of the world where the masses are fighting for their rights, dignified lives, sovereignty, and self-determination. Next slide. So comrades, this is our third day of our gathering. And in this particular day, we want to dive and discuss on how can we defend nature, how can we defend life. And before anything else, maybe we can take our discussion into three major parts. When we say defending life and nature, perhaps we are asking ourselves, or we need to ask ourselves, what life are we defending? What nature are we defending? Why should we do that? But also, how should we go about doing that? The house, I think, we have many examples that we are going to share. So the picture there, no, please. Okay, the picture there at least tries to show what people are trying to defend in terms of life, in terms of nature. People are trying to defend for their rights to use land, for their rights to access land. People are defending the right to use their forests that are in their places, the right to use water, the right to use seeds and everything. And whose life people are defending, or whose life are we defending? Life on land, the life for human beings, all other animals, and everything that exists on land, life in soils, life in air, and everything. So that is partly on the what kind of life are we trying to defend, or whose life are we defending? Now, why should we defend life and nature? Next slide, please. Next. Okay, so why should we defend life and nature? Comrades, as we are speaking in Kenya, there are comrades in Kenya here, right? In Kenya, there is a seed, as we are speaking, there is a Seed and Plant Variety Act that prohibits farmers from sharing, exchanging, or selling what they call uncertified and unregistered seeds. And the so-called offenders to this Plant Varieties Act can face a prison sentence of up to maximum 2 years, or a fine, or both, of up to 6,600 USD. As we are speaking, comrades, and we are in South Africa, and the comrades here will avail to what I'm saying, the massive growth of the big agribusiness sector in South Africa has left majority of the South Africans with no option to choose what they want to eat and get proper nutrients. As a result, majority of people in South Africa face what we call hidden hunger, and some acute. So hunger is also on the rise, not only in South Africa, but in many other parts of Africa especially. So we have agriculture as the backbone sector of most of our economies, but our people go to bed hungry. But also we have places that are they are looked upon as spaces that have advanced, like South Africa. People from my country, Tanzania, they'll tell you, if you go to South, we call it South. If you go to South, everything is good. But they don't know that if you come to South, you don't have an option of whether to choose you want to eat a GMO food or not to eat a GMO food. You will eat it because it's what is available. As we are speaking, Mexico as a country is facing is under a serious siege by the United States because of its decision to phase away the use, the importation, and the cultivation of GM food. So the country decides, like, we don't want GMO anymore in our country, and then there is this monitor of the world called USA trying to tell them, like, you are not going to do that because we use you as a market, and we don't have a place to go and sell whatever that we produce as seeds or as food. Instead, we depend on you. So also, as we are speaking, 60 million acres of forests, natural forests, are being negotiated to be traded to a company called Blue Carbon. And this 6 million acres is almost the size of a UK. From Africa are being negotiated from Tanzania, from Zimbabwe, from Zambia, from Liberia. And this is from just one company called Blue Carbon, which has its roots from the UAE. And I think it started like last year, and currently wants 6 million acres of our forests. As we are speaking, we have a South African-based company with a Norwegian capital called Green Resources that has is doing what we call forestry plantation in Tanzania, in Zimbabwe, in Uganda, in Zambia, and for example, in Uganda in particular, this company has forced the eviction of more than 8,000 people from 13 villages. So these are the dilemmas that we have when we speak of life, when we speak of nature, and the two go hand in hand. As we are speaking, comrades, why should we defend life and nature? Africa is and has become a dumping site of cheap products produced from all other parts of the world. So everything that is cheap, when it comes to food, when it comes to everything, comes to Africa, as we saw in the video when we were opening this session. Dear comrades, nature as a holistic thing enjoys what we call diversity. There is no richness in nature if you limit diversity. But this is contrary to capitalism and its growth, because capitalism doesn't enjoy diversity. For example, look at seeds. If you look at seeds, the capitalists are busy narrowing the diversity that we have in seeds. They'll tell you we don't need to have a corn that has a lot of colors. We need only to have a corn that has white colors, a white dent corn, and that is what the world needs. But that is limiting diversity. That is telling everyone that you have to eat what the capitalist wants you to eat. Capitalism doesn't want diversity in when you look at the forests. They'll tell you we don't need natural forests. We only need a forest of eucalyptus, like what has been done or what is being done in Brazil. Look at the second picture there. But also, we have to understand that the growth of capital has pushed a lot of capitalists to profit through what we call green profit making, like what you see in the first picture. So they will use all sorts of good words, all sorts of good projects, all sorts of good strategies, telling you that we need to plant trees, we need to do this, we need to do that. But to them, that means profit. They'll tell you we don't need natural forest. The forest can be made through eucalyptus only, but that only means profit to them. Next slide. So what is at stake, comrades? This is just a small picture from a report called Food Barons that was released in 2022. So in short, it says that 10 years back, we used to have 10 big companies running the private seed sector in the world. But currently, 2 companies hold major shares in the private seed sector. So you see, as we move and capitalism doesn't enjoy competition. A bit, they say that, you know, in a free world economy, there is competition and all that. It doesn't do that, not at all. So we have very few people dominating the seed sector. We have very few people dominating us. What should we get in terms of seeds? How should we get it? And if you face sanctions or everything or anything of that nature, means that your people are not going to produce. Next slide. Land in specific as a right that we have to defend. So this is the picture that shows that there was a research that was done by Grain in 2016, and it showed that 30 million hectares have been in what they call land deals in 2016. And all those land deals have been classified as land grabs across the world, as you could see in the map. But there was another research that was done by Land Matrix in 2021, indicating that it went up from basically 30 hectares to 33 million hectares. And dear comrades, majority of these land grab cases happened in Africa. Why in Africa? Because of the early 2000 global, what they called global food crisis and global financial crisis. So everyone moved from whatever they were, coming to Africa, telling themselves that there is vast land in Africa, there is free land in Africa, there are a lot of water bodies in Africa. Africa is you have seen that Africa is a sleeping giant. So that's how they try to classify Africa. Africa is a sleeping giant. We need to go there, start agribusiness, do 1, 2, 3, produce. But as a result, it has left Africa in a crisis of land grabbing. Next slide. So all this has been done in alliances. Our countries, through our governments, the big agribusiness, and what we call ghost investors, because in those land deals, a lot of them had the ghost investors picture like. You find this is an area of this investor, and then after 3 or 4 years, he or she is not there, and the land is vacant, and then someone else comes and claims to be the rightful owner of that space. And just to remind you, comrades, Africa, when you speak of the language that currently everyone is speaking, yeah, you know, we have climate change, you know, we have that, and I don't dispute that. We are facing the terrible effects of climate change. But we contribute, Africa as a continent, contribute only 3% of global greenhouse gases emission. But we face the most effects of the climate change. So whenever we speak of climate, whenever we speak of environment, apart from speaking on any other or doing any kind of analysis, we have to understand that Africa is on a dire position when you speak of climate change, when you speak of environmental crisis. Next slide. Okay, so this is what has been happening when you speak of nature being turned as a commodity to our leaders. You see, they negotiate a lot of deals with the so-called investors. Some, for example, the first picture, that president was negotiating with an Israel company, and Israel, particularly in Africa, has a number of agribusiness projects, all of which are started to make sure that as a country, they get a support from those countries. Like, you know, I've given you 1, 2, 3 in terms of agriculture, now you have to return it back to me. And that's why you see most of our countries, they don't have, they cannot even speak out of the Israel issues when it comes to whatever that they do currently. But also, they use police. The picture with the police is the picture from Uganda, where police went to a village to evict people that you have to move away from this land because the land of the investor and blah, blah, blah. So they use all sorts of things. And then there is a picture there. You see UAE and Tanzania. That's this year. They are when they were negotiating and signing MOUs on the what they call carbon trade, which is very popular currently. Next slide. So those are just pictures trying to show you how now everyone is speaking of the climate change, of the environmental crisis. So the capitalists have created a crisis and they've come with a solution, as usual. They are good at that. So GMO is their product. GMO is their thing. GMO is their baby, like their dear baby. And currently they are forcing everyone to believe that GMO is and should be used as a strategy to curb what majority of Africans are facing as effects of climate change. So you see an article on Telegraph, a lot of articles. Next slide, please. You see? Okay. African farmers want GMO seeds. I don't know where farmers met and gave out this statement that we want GMO seeds and all that sort of things. So this is what they do. Like, they create a problem, they come with a solution, and that solution, they make sure that that solution pays them dearly. Next slide. Next slide. So here is the big thing now. The carbon trade, the offsetting, the green bonds. I think you have come across with that, because also in my country, I remember one day someone told me, I heard there are Kijani bonds. The last slide, Kijani is green. So green bonds sold by this bank and all that, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, so you want to go, yes. They told me that if you buy them, you contribute, to the ongoing climate change and all those sort of things. So, dear comrades, this is now a big and new avenue. They tell you, you need to buy green bonds. You need to buy, if you buy green bonds, you'll, the bank buys them, and then the bank sells the credits of companies in Europe, companies in America to pollute. So basically, this is what it means, that you give the bank money, and then one company from Europe, from US, or anywhere there, pollutes whatever that they want to pollute, and then they come here, they give the bank also money, and then the bank give them a plan, like, okay, with what you are polluting, we have closed this one forest. I don't know how they calculate it. So we have closed this one forest for you to pollute, so keep on polluting. That is what this green bonding and everything that they say is green is trying to tell us. Next, please. So how should we fight or how should we struggle for our rights, others' rights on life and nature? Our presidents, in particular in Tanzania, in Africa, have had a number of trials, and here you see them in a picture. The first picture, keep your promises on climate finance, African leaders tells West. You know, it looks very revolutionary and all that. And if you have been following on the COP, Conference of Parties on climate, you could see our leaders, the way they try to speak with passion, like you need the West, you need to pay us, you are polluting and all that. And then the other picture is just a recent picture from Kenya when African leaders met for what they call Africa Climate Summit. Next picture. So last year, when they were negotiating, the West told them, like, yes, we are going to pay you for the effects of climate change. We are going to establish what we call loss and damage fund. Next slide. So this year, the US convoy on climate change has recently just issued a statement that US under no circumstances will pay climate reparations. That's it. So the leaders, the presidents fought, they spoke whatever that they wanted to speak, they told them yes, and then this year as they are heading to Dubai for the next COP, they told them, we are not going to pay for that. Whatever that we want you to pay, we will pay in terms of aid. Next slide. So they want to give us aid, not anything else. So the how now. How should we defend life and nature? So I'll just try to give, and I repeat, this is not a recipe, as others have just mentioned yesterday and the other day. This is not a recipe, but I'll try to give some of the trials, some of the issues that we have been working on. Now, you see in the picture, the first picture, that one is the so-called investor on a land, and then the down other picture, the one it has farmers farming, and then it has the other one, it has seeds. So, comrades, our number one recommendation or proposition is to reclaim the rights of the commons. I remember, like past month, Professor Shivj was addressing a topic somewhere, and he told us, like, not even to just reclaim. Let's reclaim the right to use the commons, the right to use the commons, the land, our seeds, our water bodies, and everything. And so with the seeds, we can do many things. With land, we have examples of MST doing occupation. It might not work for you, but it works for them. So can be something else that works for you. It can work, and we can make use of that. We have an example of the ABM. But also we have, we can see what we can do on seeds. We have all these sorts of, currently people are speaking, I'm establishing a gene bank, I'm establishing a seed bank and all that. But in most of the places, those things are being established just as mere projects, the NGO-like projects. I know a very good example from Zimsoft. They are doing that, and it's working. That's perfect. The organization that I'm coming from, Mviwata, is doing that, and that's perfect. And we said, members have said, to us, seed banking doesn't require a building. To us, seed banking is a system of us ensuring that we have seeds in our homes. We have seeds for the next season. So we have farmers producing their own seeds. We have farmers sharing their own seeds. Things are happening there. But also, we can see how we hold our local fairs, food fairs, seed fairs. Whenever we meet, we come with seed. I was very happy today I was given seeds. And that's what we do. as members of La Via Campesina, whenever we meet, we come with seeds. We give each other seeds. Please take this, go and plant it in your home. So that's how we defend the commons. We can't just sit down, release statements every day. We want our seeds, but we have to act. I don't say that statements don't work. They work, but we have to act, comrades, because the capitalists are acting. Next proposition is on localizing and democratizing our food system through agroecology and food sovereignty. We need to create food system that is centered on the needs, on the rights and cultures of the communities. Tanzanians, for example, we are used to eat nice foods with good aroma. So whenever I see rice, I smell first. Because that's what we are used to. We are used to have food is a feast in our country. Food is a celebration in our country. If you go to a Tanzanian home, the first thing they'll be like, so what will you eat? You see, so that's how we treat each other, and that's how we treat food. So food isn't just eaten just to be eaten. It's a celebration. It's an act of friendship. It's an act of care. And that's how we should view food. We shouldn't view food just as a product that can be sold at the market. And we need to put a demarcation that these things can be put at the market and sold, but these things cannot be put at the market and sold. I don't say that farmers shouldn't sell what they produce. We need to create food production system that is based on the local and indigenous practices of the people. For example, in saving and sharing seeds, and in harnessing and protecting biodiversity. Comrades, we should stop this stupidity of calling our foods. There is this thing, the NGO world, the FAO is trying to tell us, like, you have orphan crops, African indigenous crops. They are indigenous, yet Africans. It's confusing. Orphan crops like the millet, the finger millet, the wheat that we have in our homes, they are orphan simply because they don't want to put funds for them, for research and for development. Now they are orphan, but we eat them. We have them in our homes. We need to fight against repressive policies, but also blocking all exploitative arrangements. Comrades, if you see a farmer organization saying no to GMO, please move with that slogan. Say no to GMO. If you see a farm organization fighting for their land, next slide, please. Please join that campaign, because that's how we tell them that enough is enough, and we don't want your capital in agriculture. We don't want your capital in people's lives. But also there is this trend that currently they are telling us that we need transition. We need to go to a type of agriculture that takes everybody in. We have to ask a very pertinent question in that transition. Where is justice in that transition? Should Africa continue being the so-called food basket of other nations? Like, we keep on producing even what we don't consume. In Tanzania, we produce. Okay, I'm waiting. We produce tea, we produce coffee, but we don't use them. The first grade, all of it goes to Europe. Organizing in a new way is our last proposition. The first proposal is on the how do we get women, how do we get youth in this? Peasant youth, peasant women exist in the villages. They are there. And agriculture is their activity 24/7. But we just need to see a new way of organizing these people. And at least in La Via Campesina, at Mviwata, we are implementing what we call peasant feminism, a new way of trying to see how we get together the question of land, the question of seats, the question of violence against women, all at par. Because we cannot just say, women are being faced by violence, and if you go to a village, I'm telling you, you'll be surprised if you ask them, so what is that violence? They'll tell you, seats, land, And if you are here speaking 1, 2, 3, it doesn't add up to what they speak in the villages. Education in all its forms. Let's use mass methods of educating the people. Let's use every space that we have and we can use. But also, we should fight against transnational companies and campaigns, their campaigns and their co-optation strategies. But also, we should support agroecology marketing, comrades. If you see farmers are producing agroecologically, support them, because that's how you keep them doing that. Slides as we finish. Next slide. Yes, another slide. Okay, and the last slide. Asante sana. Thank you very much.
Viva Mviwata, viva! Thank you very much. Comrade, I'll come for my seeds because I don't trust the ones at Big and Pay. I'll come before we leave this conference. Thank you. Comrades, I'm going to, for the sake of time, introduce the next speaker without wasting any of the time. I mean, you've said some very insightful things about what are we actually defending. We know we are defending our land, we're defending our rivers, we're defending our minerals, we're defending our food, which is full of GMOs that are killing our people, and at the quest for profits. So, I mean, the just transition question, you're quite right. I mean, what is it really? We've lost it. It's a form of exploitation and building more capitalist system. So with that, comrades, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Tikdenda Singh Panwa. Yes, that's you. You thought you were last night. Apologies. He is the former deputy mayor of Shimla, Himachal Pradesh in India, member of the Communist Party of India, a Marxist party, and he's also an author. Let's welcome comrade. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade, and I will not, I fully endorse what the previous speaker has spoken. What I'm going to do is trying to bring in this whole juggernaut of the challenge that we have from the climate perspective and the whole unsustainability of the system that we are living in. You can't see that screen, but I can see that screen, and there's a screen that was flashing, go slow. So the moment I go fast, please remind me that I have to go slow. Anwar as belief my grote ut dailan one diverse Nazis and manse and that is in there. Revolutionary grote an ons kamrade what in Araik Nalantis one stride and emancipace hai. That's what Google translated to me, and I'm sure you must have understood. Revolutionary greetings from the land of diverse people, diverse nationalities, and someone who led the freedom struggle, and the genesis of that freedom struggle grew here in South Africa, Mahatma Gandhi. So, revolutionary greetings to you, comrades. My dear worthy friends, as we discuss the dilemmas of humanity, the challenge before us is definitely unprecedented, as my previous speaker spoke about, both in terms of building our struggles and preserving Mother Nature. This crisis of our times, I call it as an existential crisis, existential for human beings, for labor, and for nature. Now, why? I would just try to dwell on it a little further. Why I call it existential? To me, there are three important phases or transcendence periods in the evolutionary history of Earth and human beings. The first one, because I've been a student of genetics, so I don't miss the point wherever I get a chance to speak about that. The first one, I say, is the transcendence from the inorganic matter to the organic matter, where succession takes place through millions and millions of years, from lichens to mosses to pteridophytes to finally the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. Though this evolutionary process is also being challenged now. They want to make us believe someone else, that there was no evolution, there was no evolutionary process in transcendence, what we have witnessed. The second transcendence, what to me is the invention of fire and wheel that led to vast expansion of the evolutionary process. I don't think I have to go into all those details here. The third about which we are dealing is the transcendence from our previous epochs to the steam engine or the advent of industrial revolution that has led to changes and aggrandizement of world resources never heard of before. I mean, it's a completely new phase. I'll try to explain what does that mean. And Marx succinctly puts it in this way, and I'm sure all of you know that. All that is solid melts into air, and all that is holy becomes profane. This shows not just the material strength of capitalism, but also the cultural milieu, what our comrade from the metal workers, I mean the leader who was saying about the whole question of cultural question in building the socialist structures that we're talking about. So not just the material strength of capitalism, but also the cultural milieu that it draws us into. Now, what is the reality? I think there has to be a very intrinsic struggle, what our comrade also said, between carbon emissions, inequality. There's a very intrinsic struggle. Commoditization of nature and accumulation through disposition and expropriation becomes the hallmark of such a system that we are witnessing across the globe. But why this has not been resisted, I do not know. I do not mean that it's not been resisted, but or the resistance, or there has been resistance, the success stories are not too expansive. Marx eloquently explains it, and he says that in the process of building capitalism, what capital does is this. It robs man away from nature and breaks the dialectical unity between man and nature. So essential. So what our comrade was saying about, going back to the land, to nature. And something that we have seen so vividly in the past epochs and periods, be it feudalism, be it whatever slave society, but it was part and parcel of that. In the over last 2 centuries of world capitalism, what do we find? Why it is important that we defend life and nature? First, exploitation of man and nature of a phenomenal order. We've never heard about that. Carbon emissions from the world capitalist powers making the planet Earth unsustainable. Global warming that leads to unprecedented damage and irreparable loss. I just request you all have mobiles, just go to Google and search Google climate clock. Can you just tell me how much time we have left? Just go to your mobile, search the Google climate clock. What does it say? Please let me know. How much time do we have? 5 years? Before we reach the tipping point? Is it not showing? How much? The countdown is what? 5 years?
It's loading. The internet is.
Maybe all of you. Apparently it's 5 years. So why is it important? That's the time we have left. That is left before us before the catastrophic proportions of climate change reach a tipping point. It's already there, but once it reaches the tipping point, there's no coming back. Threat to biodiversity, our friend said, and massive land use change for capital accumulation, and of course, oceanic salinity. Let me try to explain it a little further. We've seen imperialism's worst phase in the recent decades, creating an unequal world and plundering the world. The immediate laboratory of this is Palestine. Our sister from Palestine spoke in the first session. We've seen that is the new laboratory of world imperialism. The second, all about carbon emissions. What world capitalism is projecting is that it is a common failure. I mean, what we were saying, what our moderator also said, of humankind, and solutions to the current phase is in technology. Is it so? The language and vocabulary of the theme and the desired results have an inherent contradiction, and hence such processes and interventions fetch neither the desired results nor are able to bring in a major disruption. That's a major disruption. That the disruption has to be a socialist disruption. There can't be any other disruption. Everyone accounted for, they say, and everyone accountable. I again reiterate, everyone accounted for and everyone accountable is something similar to the polluter asking the consumer to clear the pollution. The polluter asking the consumer to clear the pollution with an alibi of everyone being part of the ecosystem, responsible for immense damage that has been done to planet Earth. Whereas we know the role of the least developed countries and even the developing countries in climate change is minimal, though they face greater challenges and are more vulnerable than their developed counterparts in the world. How can everyone be accounted for at the same level? Well, we have the IPCC road. I'm sure you're aware of that. The IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That brings out, and we have the IPCC report 6, and of course working groups 1, 2, and 3 that speaks about mitigation, adaptation. And this report screams at us, pointing out at the imminent necessity of intervention. But this must be done with a climate justice perspective. First, the report points out the catastrophic levels of carbon emissions in the post-industrial period. These emissions have led to a rise in temperature. We all know that. Since many COPs, the Conference of Parties, particularly COP15 in Paris, the goal has been not to allow the rise to more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's why I asked you to have a look at your clocks. Why? Because once it reaches the tipping point, then the chances for repair and reversal are extremely difficult. We already have situations where coastal cities are submerging and mountains are facing havoc in unprecedented floods. Take, for example, because we do not have anyone here from Bangladesh, but in the Bay of Bengal, there has been a contestation between two countries. It's my nation, India, and Bangladesh. We were contesting over an island. India claimed it's ours, and Bangladesh claimed it's theirs. Do you know the state of that island now? It's already submerged. It's gone. It's already underwater. So another interesting fact is that half of world's human-made atmospheric carbon dioxide was emitted in the last 3 to 4 decades. I again reiterate, comrade, please just have an ear on that. That half of world's human-made atmospheric carbon dioxide was emitted in the last 3 to 4 decades. And in this period, just 20 big companies, the transnational corporations, have contributed 33% of world historic emissions. And those emissions come from cement and of course, energy, and are still at work and still grabbing subsidies over fossil fuels and whatnot. Just 33% comes from 20 companies. We know what needs to be done. It's not a big deal. But why is it not being done? Let's go through that. So how can there be a common accountability? That's the whole point I wanted to build up. Between 1758 to 2020, the CO2 emissions swelled from 0.01 billion metric tons to 34.07 billion metric tons. The second, of course, the imminent threat or the process is what my sister just spoke about. One of the losses is the biodiversity loss. Now, many feel biodiversity, what happens if there's a loss to biodiversity? So we have a very funny anecdote in one of the conferences where there were scientists. And they pointed out that, there's a very strong interconnection between our evolution and the honeybees. So if honeybees are extinct, we are extinct. They said, don't worry. That's the capital solution. They said, we'll have robotic honeybees. You don't have to worry about that. So we are entering to the stage for robotic honeybees. So biodiversity is such an important, and the loss to biodiversity is accelerating at a rate not found in any record. Since the Cretaceous extinction, I'm sure you know what a Cretaceous extinction is, which is some 66 million years ago. It's a real threat. Let's accept that. The second part is question of land use patterns. And there is a strong interconnection between change in land use patterns and the biodiversity loss. Changes in land use patterns for industrial and real estate development are also causing water scarcity. The reductionist climate change theories view the problem with a very narrow lens. And in that exercise, they lose the essence of climate change, that is the predatory capital world that works on the essence of maximization of profit, thus denuding the environment and nature. For example, you come to India and you'll find now there are two major islands, Andaman Nicobar Islands and Lakshadweep. Both the islands, we are planning real estate development, massive capital investment. We want to turn Lakshadweep into Singapore. We want to turn Andamans into another. So one can imagine what is going to happen to the native people, to the native or aboriginals of that place. Then, of course, excess level of nitrogen, where vast excesses of nitrogen through fertilizers, runoff, etc., have been polluting water bodies in soil, thus risking anoxic extinctions. Anoxic extinctions are where there's no oxygen, then there's no marine life. And there's no marine life, we are gone, comrades. So we must know what does all that mean. Just to give you a glimpse that the Earth is some 4.5 billion years old, and the earliest life forms from inanimate matter to animate is about 3.7 billion years, with the evolutionary process of succession on land and water. The evolution of Homo sapiens, you and me, is some 200,000 to 300,000 years. Man as a subjective conscious being with the ability to create new nature is just a fraction of Earth's period of existence. But it's not just man, it's the appropriation of nature for the maximization of profits, about which Marx speaks. I'll again come back to it. So what does it mean? I mean, you know, the whole bunch of these. So there's a very fascinating study by the UN humanitarian group called The Anatomy of the Silent Crisis. It's a question of climate justice. And it's a very comprehensive report that speaks that every year climate change leaves 300,000 people dead. I mean, just imagine how many people die in a war. It's a climate war. It's a climate war, it's a climate justice. 325 million people seriously affected and causes average annual economic losses of $850 billion. Whatever assets we create, whatever infrastructure we are creating, if that infrastructure is not climate resilient, is not people resilient, the same infrastructure goes down the drains. And that's exactly what is happening. So 4 billion people are vulnerable and 500 million people are at risk. That's the IPCC report 6 that points out. So what's going to happen? What's going to happen is extreme weather events are going to rise. What does it mean? That earlier the disasters that used to happen once in a century, now we will have disasters 100 in a century. We've just seen the kind of flooding that has happened in India, in the Himalayas. People are here from Nepal. They know what does that mean. So more rain, more precipitation in a lesser period of time. That's exactly what is happening. We've seen in Libya, I think more than 5,000, 10,000 are missing. 15,000 people are missing or dead. This is the reality which we are facing. And of course, the hottest period on Earth. This year is the hottest period. July 4, the hottest in the recorded history of humankind. July 4, hottest. July 5, hotter than 4. July 6, hotter than July 5. 7 was lesser than 6. July 8, even hotter than 5. What is it that is happening? In China, we've seen that it reached almost more than 50 degrees, 55 degrees. We can't sustain, and all this is because of the aggrandizement of nature, the kind of world capitalism we are living in. So it's a question of global justice. Why? Because our comrade from Africa just pointed out, what is our contribution in the global south? Developing countries bear, I mean, that's the global south, bear over 9/10 of climate change burden, 9/10, that's 90%. 98% of seriously affected, and 99% of all deaths from weather-related disasters takes place in the global south, along with 90% of total economic losses. And what is the contribution of what we call the least developed countries in the UN phraseology is 1%. 1% contribution to carbon emissions, and still facing the largest wrath. It's a question of climate justice. So, and it exacerbates existing inequalities for us as Marxists faced by vulnerable groups, particularly women, children, and the elderly. The consequences of climate change and poverty are not distributed uniformly within communities. Individual and social factors also determine the vulnerability. So what is the global capitalist solution to this? The global capitalist solution is sell technologies. Why can't we have EV cars? So you buy EV cars to reduce your emissions. So the solutions would be, and I'll come to that, the whole process of city building is more technocentric solutions. You buy a technology, you buy more capital-intensive technologies from them, and that's how you introduce the technology in your countries, in your cities, and that's how you build your. So this vocabulary, points out, even the IPCC, by the way, just to give you a glimpse, IPCC is just like, for some in Christianity, what Bible is, for Hindus, Gita is, for Muslims, Quran is. The IPCC report is a kind of Bible for the climate scientists. So it's pointing, and of course they're not communists, but it's pointing out at a systemic change. Unless and until there's a systemic change, you cannot reverse it. So what the systemic change has to be? The systemic change has to be end of capitalism and the birth of socialism. Without that systemic change, you can't bring anything. So in this scenario, our comrade pointed out at the agricultural aspect. I want to point out at the urban work, because I have been served the city as the deputy mayor for 5 years. And I can share some of the nuances, some experiences, how cities are so important at a pivotal space in not just mitigating, but also in adapting to this whole construction to the climate change, also in the construction of socialist futures. Why? Because let us understand the relationship between building socialist future and current global crisis, social and ecological crisis, and why cities fall at the pivot. We already know around 55% of global population is living in urban world. And the way global south is moving its demography from the rural to urban, there will be a further push. It will be not long when we have 70% people living in urban centers. They currently consume 75% of global primary energy and emit almost 75% of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's very clear where things are. At the same time, 85% of global GDP is contributed by the cities and are also centers of capital accumulation. So GDP contribution means what? It's basically actually you're accumulating capital. And how this accumulation is taking place? It's by disposition, it's by expropriation. And the whole process of city building, which I want to speak about. Also, these spaces have become centers of energy guzzlers. So there is a transformation even in the capitalist production system that we are witnessing in the cities. As what they say, we are entering the fourth stage of industrial revolution. And the fourth stage is the Internet of Things. It is estimated that the bogey, this whole question of Internet of Things is around $5 trillion annual. But McKinsey, one of the consultants, Global Capital, estimates it's almost $11 trillion by 2025. Average, that is where, the capital accumulation is taking place. What is our way? What is our solution to that? I think that is where we have to. Ursula Hughes writes in one of the socialist registers, and she states, and she points out that, quoting the UNCTAD report, that according to her, 20 largest transnational corporations shifted their portfolio from finance to utilities. So which means the manner in which we are building our cities, the utilities that the services that we are providing is going to be a major area where there is going to be question of carbon emission, where there is going to be large capital accumulation. And another area, and profit for large capital and misery for the mass of the people is quintessential. Another area of phenomenal wealth generation or accumulation of capital has been the changed city governance. We find that's what I was discussing with comrade who owns Johannesburg, who runs Johannesburg. The city administration of Johannesburg. So from city managers, now cities are being termed as city entrepreneurs. What does a city entrepreneur means? It means that you change your laws in order to attract investment, and that's how you further burden people. And cities were asked to compete against each other, and their land laws were made flexible for the private and venture capital to enter and make substantial gains. Cities, let me quote in a little Marxist political economy, jargon, I would say. And so another transformation that we are witnessing in the cities is what in Marxist political economy we call from the use value to exchange value. Now, what is a use value and what is an exchange value? Comrade was quoting, I think, Comrade, you were quoting the Washington Consensus. What does the Washington Consensus tells us? It states, is water a right or water a need? So they push that water is a need. It's not a right. And if water is a need, then there are many players in the market who can provide water. In Johannesburg, that's what, I just went through the papers, and in Johannesburg we found that there's a real water crisis going on here, though we do not know because we are staying in a hotel. But in the city and in some of the areas, and Johannesburg has a company that is a water utility that provides water to its citizens, and they boast of a turnover of 1.6 billion rand. That's what they're talking about. And today they were expecting blessings of shower because rain to come and because they are really facing water scarcity. It's universal, comrades, universally happening in global south, where the push from global north is to sell their technologies, and utilities, service sector is one of the major areas where this large capital is entering and further creating inequalities in our centers. So, water privatization, education is a right or a need. Education is one of the biggest sectors for capital accumulation in the cities. So this use value for society is steadfastly being transformed into industry. And that's where, so the whole process of city building is another feature that facilitates it. Samuel Stein, by the way, from the US, one of the finest architects I've come across, he says, we planners, we build cities, we are not corrupt. It's the system that makes us corrupt. So it's the system that pushes us what kind of cities are we going to build. So in the whole planning process you will find, and that's where my argument also holds, in the whole process of city planning you will find that the push is not for health centers. The push is for multi-speciality hospitals. The push will not be for playgrounds for the children. The push will be for grand stadiums to come up. And that's a universal phenomenon we are witnessing. We have to reclaim those spaces. Like our comrade said, we have to reclaim our spaces in the agroeconomic field. We have to reclaim these spaces in the urban centers. So, and of course, the kind of, and there's another very interesting example that I want to share with you. And there's a very funny anecdote, by the way, comrade. I did a fellowship on urban mobility from a city called Leipzig. Leipzig is in Germany. It's a very interesting city for the simple reason because it's almost 100% free mobility, which means you just enter a bus, you enter a tram, it's free. Not just that, 25% of the working people, and their bicycle lanes, either they cycle to their office or they are pedestrians. It's a classical case of how a city must be developed from the urban mobility concept. But that's not the point. The point is when I was given a task, just give me 5 more minutes, I can see. Sorry, slow down. So when I was given a task, so they were further squeezing the space of motorized transport. They had 8 lanes motorized transport to 6 lanes and giving those 2 lanes to the pedestrians, to the cyclists. And I told this professor, what are you doing? Why are you befooling us? He said, what do you mean by befooling you? I said, you are a city which is an ideal city in the sense, for the working population, which has 100% free mobility, cycling and all that stuff, which means, you democratize the surplus. The whole question from the Marxist point. But I said, why are you befooling us? Because 70% of Leipzig's employment sustains on the manufacturing of one of the worst guzzlers of the world, that's Porsche. So the Porsche manufacturing takes place in Leipzig. I said, why are you befooling us? So then for whom are you manufacturing these cars? You are reducing your space, you don't allow your cars to be run on your roads. Then for whom are you manufacturing your cars? The funniest answer I ever got, comrade. And that explains everything. He said, for you, in the global south. You take loans from us, that's exactly, you come to my country, this phenomenal widening of the roads, flyovers, phenomenal capital, current account deficit massively growing. They have a current account surplus. We have a current account deficit because we take phenomenal loans, widen our roads, there's a middle class that has emerged. Who wants these cars? He said, for you. You please buy these cars from us. Actually, that is not the sustainable way. And that's where I think we need to intervene. How do we organize? I don't have to tell you, Comrade said, the only thing that he knows to strike. The only thing I know also to organize people. That's how I came. But I think the whole process of socialist reconstruction must be kept in mind. And that is, how do we democratize this surplus? To me, the socialist advance is, how do we democratize this surplus that is getting accumulated in a few hands? How do we do that? I think, Comrade, there's one suggestion, and that's where we need to just move ahead. You spoke about culture. You spoke about many things. I think the point of intervention, to me, has to be what Lefebvre said, right to the city, claiming the right to the city. And how do we claim our right to the city? For heaven's sake, let's move out of our factories. That doesn't mean we just leave the factories. The factories are already gone, by the way. There's a new class that has emerged, Like, Comrade, we had a strike in Delhi. It took almost 1 month for us to identify where the office of Uber is. Because it's all platform-based economy. It was so difficult to find out where Uber is. But I think what the working class and the historic responsibility can only be taken by the working class, because that is the most advanced contingent for this revolutionary process. Move out of the factories and treat cities as factories. Reclaim your spaces. The whole question of how the city is to be built, that is a space, that is an area we hardly intervene. Just go by the city development plans. Has there ever been an intervention from the working class perspective? Take cities, treat cities as factories. We know how well to organize a strike in the factory, but we are not that well equipped to organize a strike in a city on the issues of housing, on the issues of water utilities, the way the water utilities are being privatized, on the issues of public mobility. These are class issues. My experience serving city, I think there are many more that I can bring out, but I think that's a major area. One of the key areas where we should intervene. Treat cities as factories, organize city as a platform of building alternatives, and where we can also go for socialist reconstruction. So in the Indian context, I would say, and of course, cooperative movement, there were some progressive laws, but we are, since I do not have that much time, Comrade, I would have gone to those details, but there were some progressive laws on environment. Those laws have been finished. They have been diluted, called the Environment Impact Assessment, the Forest Rights Act for my tribal communities. And one thing which I would say, we have to be a little cautious about nationalization of some of the companies. Nationalization is not the solution, Comrade. Ask me. I come from the Himalayas, from the tribal areas, and we have just denuded our tribal people, tribal forests. And all this has been done by our national companies that generate hydropower electricity. So it's not just about nationalization, it's about cooperativization. What is the participation of the people? How is it getting democratic? Already 20 of my villages in the Himalayas, they've lost their existence. They've completely submerged. So it's not just nationalization. I think we have to think beyond nationalization. Because nationalization, national companies, in themselves become one of the tools of oppression, one of the tools of exploitation. I think as a socialist, we have to think little beyond that. And so what our comrade said in the beginning, in the to be or not to be, Julius Caesar. So there's no question of to not to be, it has to be. Julius Caesar speaks about unity in an ethereal world. Here the unity is required in a real world, comrade. There's no question of not to be, it has to be. And there where the first two transcendences, that's why I say I started from the true transcendences, from Lichens to Mosses, and then to Wheel. The first two transcendences were evolutionary. This one has to be revolutionary. And the only way is through this revolutionary process. And it's not me. Marx succinctly points out. Let's go and read Marx Capital 2, Volume 2 and 3 once again. What does he speak? We normally miss that important point. He says, and I want to reiterate, struggle against injustice equals struggle for humanism. That's exactly what we're doing. But which further equals to struggle for naturalism. So struggle for naturalism is also a struggle against injustice, is a struggle for for humanism. And Marx established that's where I want to finish off. Conscious unity between humans and nature, and ensuring that was a central task for a future society. If Marx was later to conceptualize environment destruction as an immanent contradiction of capitalism, his ecological critique in Capital partially originates from his early insight into the modern disunion of human-nature relationship. I think that is something which very important. And lastly, Comrade said about the class struggle. We all know class struggle comprises three important elements: economic, political, ideological. In India, since the advent of neoliberal capitalism, we have seen 20 major general strikes taking place. But the same working class, when it comes to political struggle, goes back and votes for the extreme right party. The farmer struggle that Vijay Prashad was talking about, 700 people lost in that struggle. They stayed there for 1 year. After that 1 year, when they went back, who did they vote for? For an extreme right party. So the class struggle is not just economic struggle. It has to be political and ideological. And the way things are turning, as I've said, if India turns fascist, it should not, then, only God can save South Asia, because it's a serious threat, the way things are unfolding in the Indian subcontinent. Of course, our comrades are still in jail, we know that. And it's not, why I'm saying so, because it's not that we've not seen repression. Of course, unlike you, comrade, you've seen the worst forms. But we've lost 3,000 of our comrades in a semi-fascist terror in a state in West Bengal. In Punjab, we've lost more than 500 people. It's not that I myself was in jail for 2.5 years. So we've seen this face of the state. But the new state that is emerging, it is far draconian than the past. It is a completely different draconian form that we are witnessing. And to build socialist structures would mean massive unity, massive solidarity of the people. Else, the gains that we have achieved in the past, those gains, to even sustain those gains would be a very interesting challenge. So the fight for nature, for a better, secure future, is also a political fight. I think that's what we are going to have witness. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Comrade Tikenda. Thank you. We are aware that our time is a bit limited, and our interpreters have to go for lunch at 12:30. So just to our next speakers, just be aware of that, and we might not have time for comments at the end. But I think it's important to appreciate that these are in-depth, rich discussions that we must give some time to. So just for your understanding, I would have interrupted you sooner, but I thought, it's worth us hearing your whole presentation. With that said, I'm going to introduce Hussein Khili. Is a member of the Nomad Association of Tunisia and is a university professor and an expert in the development and resource management. Thank you. Welcome.
شكرا. قبل أن أبدأ.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I would like to salute the Palestinian resistance in Gaza and all occupied territories. I want to send a salute to the Palestinian people, which is under attack from the fierce Zionist occupation for over 17 years, proving that he deserves to live, that the Palestinian people deserves to live. And I will use the concept of land here. Today we talked about climate change, the environment, but I would like to start by saying that climate change is a natural phenomenon and that global warming is important for the land, but nature has its own laws. And all these natural cycles that impose climate changes we notice 150,000 years pass to give time to the creatures, to the natural environment to replenish itself, to renew itself, to continue to live. But what we live today is a capitalist, imperialist crime par excellence that has started since 230 years ago, at the end of the 18th century, with the Industrial Revolution, with mining, coal, using coal or all other extracted minerals produce very toxic gases like the methane gas and CO2. These two gases, when they accumulate in masses and in condensed forms, they transform the earth into an extremely hot planet. This global warming is indeed important for the land. Why? Because this layer of natural gases are created to absorb some type of the radiations coming from the sun, because the sun gives us infrared and ultra-red radiations. So infrared radiations disseminate in the air, and imagine if we don't have global warming and what these gases do. In fact, they play a very positive role. The temperature on Earth would become minus 20 degrees Celsius, and it would be impossible for us to live. Therefore, nature is organized. It has its own natural cycle. But the capitalist system, through exploitation, through extractive exploitation of all these resources, through many industrial revolutions, they produced so many toxic gases, especially since the third industrial revolution, with the condensed manufacturing and production. And even in agriculture, we notice that there are so many toxic gases that are produced and that cause global warming. But we want to ask here, do we all agree that we are living these climate changes in a healthy way? I would like to get back to one of the statements of the World Bank in 1998, when the World Bank representative said, poor people need to live and to eat. But we understand through this statement since 1991 that the World Bank puts the responsibility on the shoulders of the poor people, the responsibility of global warming on the shoulders of poor people. And from here, from this platform in South Africa, we heard that poverty and precarity are the causes of global warming, and it's because poor people are using the wood from the forests to heat their houses. They are causing deforestation and therefore global warming. This is what happens and what is said in the big congresses of the capitalist system, in which multinational companies producing power participate and give their faulty statements, unrecognizing that they produce the methane gas which produces CO2 in extremely dangerous emissions. The results or the consequences of Davos Congress in 2021 concluded that the losses are $329 billion of losses. These losses are also tied to so many natural catastrophes and floods and desertification, deforestations, and billions of dollars of losses. Look at the earthquake and the tornadoes, especially the last catastrophe in Darna in Libya. Of course, the biggest loser in all this is the poor class. As my comrade earlier said from Tanzania, she said that the whole African continent only emits 3% of methane gases. In Tunisia, we only produce 0.07% of gases, but in Tunisia, we suffer from the lack of water resources, and for 6 months now we've been suffering from lack of water, and we receive water only in a limited number of hours per day for over 6 months now. So we are suffering from all these natural climate change consequences. China, for example, participates with 25% of gas emissions. 2 countries in the world produce 49% of gas emissions, and the European Union participates with 21% of gas emissions. All these 3 entities accumulate wealth, but they accuse us, the poor classes, of being the cause behind global warming. Look at Congress number 27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt, where these powers decided to create a fund to give compensation to poor peoples. Look, COP28 in the UAE also created a similar fund, but all these funds are just ink on paper. The peoples are not going to receive any penny of all this money. These capitalist, figurative congresses are trying to polish the image of capitalism, pretending that capitalism is able to adjust and limit the gas emissions. It's obvious that nature is being objectified, commodified in these conferences. And nature is turned into a commodity in these congresses. In the countries of the South, we are today required to seriously think of creating congresses for the poor classes in which we fight and undermine the narrative of the capitalist system and try to fight this narrative accusing us poor people of being the cause of global warming. We have to fight the multinational companies and transnational companies and their narratives. My comrade earlier talked about the carbon trade and capitalist companies active in the energy sector is using the wind and the solar energy, and they talk about the green hydrogen, and we know quite well that green hydrogen requires water in order to be extracted, and we are already peoples suffering from lack of water sources. So these renewable energies are not in our benefit. We have sun, we have wind energies, but it's the transnational companies that will extract these resources and will turn them to their own use through very developed cables and through very developed and technologically developed means. In Egypt and Libya and Tunisia and all countries of sub-Saharan Africa will witness huge extraction of resources from their lands and even loss of lands. The extraction of green hydrogen requires huge quantities of water. And I can assure you that these transnational companies will use our sea water, ocean water, and our gases in order to provide clean alternative energies for themselves, and we will be unable to even provide the simplest quantities of water that preserve our dignity. There is no dignity for any human being without water. Water is life. With all these changes, we have witnessed so many studies conducted on the impact of these gas emissions on seeds. You know that the capitalist system destroyed, since the 60s, the specificity of our countries. We've seen so many studies on the environmental migration of the peoples of the South, leaving the terrible natural conditions in their countries to look for other lands. This is what we call environmental migration. We noticed that the oasis and the palm trees and the islands and all these humid environmental systems are the most affected by climate change. But there is an approach that we haven't heard about yet, which is how the impact of all this on the working class. We have lived extreme changes of climate. We've witnessed in July and in August this year extreme weather conditions, and we experienced the hottest months since the beginning of humanity, since at least we started to measure temperature. We witnessed 50 and 55 degrees Celsius of high temperature, and imagine the working classes working in factories and working in the open air, all those workers spending more than 12 hours per day in continuous work, all those workers who don't have houses, don't have energy, don't have water. When they go back home, they will be the real victims, direct victims of these climate changes, especially in the southern countries. And maybe the most extreme impacts on workers, and later I will talk about the role of unions and the working spaces, but the most physical condition that will affect these workers is extreme exhaustion, extreme fatigue, all those hygiene and cleaning workers, construction workers who spend over 6 hours of work in the open air will suffer from extreme stress and exhaustion due to temperature, thermal stress, we call it, and this will cause even hallucinations. And an American Statistics Institute said that the accidents resulting from thermal stress rose up to 24%, and this is caused by extreme dehydration, bad working conditions, and of course the sun. There are also so many diseases linked to renal failures because the workers don't have enough water to hydrate themselves when they experience thermal stress. So they develop chronic renal diseases, which is a deadly disease, as you know. Not to mention the heat strikes for workers who are working for 12 continuous hours, especially for the benefit of transnational companies and multinational companies, not to mention all the cancerous skin diseases. And this is what we've heard from the International Labour Organization that stated that skin cancer is one of the diseases that many laborers and workers suffer from, especially if they work straightly under the sun. And in front of all these diseases and conditions, the workers are living in extreme conditions in front of this inflation that they are witnessing in their countries. They lack basic resources, basic amenities, and comfortable transportation means they don't benefit mostly from the free education, especially in front of this fierce attack by the international capitalist companies attacking free education. This exploitation makes the lack of supply and demand within this monopoly, within this system, witnessing a rise in prices and this rising inflation, especially when there is no more subsidized on basic elements. And in front of all this, it is the worker who suffers the most, affected by a lack in consumer power or purchasing power. This is a harsh attack to the working class, and this is also a way to fragment the working class and fragment the relationship between the unions and the workers. And in the future we will witness a fierce attack under this continuous climate change and the non-recognition of the capitalist system of its what it's doing. And in front of everything that the technology is offering, we will witness that there will be less and less employees because they will be replaced by robots. Millions of workers will lose their jobs to robots, and this is a fierce attack to unionism. We, the Red Marxists, believe that the labor movement is the leading movement that can vanquish capitalism. This is why this analysis that I had, of course, little time to present to you because I have no time to expand. I'd like to ask, what are the alternatives in front of the working class today? What are the alternatives in front of us, especially that we are fragmented in our struggle, because the capitalist system is unified at the level of dynamics, at the level of mechanisms, at the level of tools. But we are today required to unify our struggle and internationalize our struggle at all fronts. And I would like to say that the real problem behind climate change and human exploitation of nature is connected to the capitalist production system, because the latter is the main cause behind climate changes. So our struggle will be at two levels, will be twofold, strategically to defeat capitalist systems through providing more balanced, more just use of natural resources. Socialism is the key, socialism is the alternative, but this is a type of struggle that will take a lot of time, takes a lot of planning, takes a lot of coordination. But within these very difficult conditions, our workers will not wait for strategic solutions. We have to struggle as unions, as workers, as a working class for our survival, to remain alive in order to vanquish the capitalist system and push the capitalist system to improve the working conditions and the working spaces, to reduce the working hours, to improve the salaries, and to review all these working codes that aim principally to unify the capitalist system, whether in the center or subsidized countries. Capitalist systems have their agents and have their tools. Today, we are required to endorse all these causes in our literature, in our unionist work, in our work everywhere at the level of education, construction, hygiene, in all sectors. I consider that a worker in a farm or a worker in a factory suffers a lot from climate change, especially women. Women are the weakest in this chain of patriarchal society. And thank you for your attention. Sorry for being long.
Thank you very much, Comrade Hussein. Before I introduce my next speaker, you raised some very interesting points, Comrade, around how capital is obviously commodifying our environment, which is a challenge. And what we do know for sure is that capitalism and imperialism cannot simultaneously save us, and transition into a clean and renewable energy. So as long as capitalism and imperialism are systems based on looting, plundering of our nature, and oppressing and exploiting our working class people, our rural communities, we have a long way to go, and we are on the way of finding our own solutions. With that said, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, our last speaker, Comrade Carlos Barrentos, a leader and the founder of the Committee of Peasant Unity in Guatemala, an indigenous and peasant organization. He is also part of the coordination of ALBA movements. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Comrade.
Bien.
Yes.
Buenos días, compañeros.
Good morning, comrades.
Para mí es
For me, it is
enorme emoción estar acá.
a great
Primero
pleasure to be here.
Todas y todos
First
que
and
estamos
foremost,
acá,
because all of
nuestras
us
más
that are
antiguas
here
raíces tienen
at
que
our
ver con el
deepest
territorio,
roots
con la cuna de
are
los
situated here in this region of the world, in the cradle of humanity.
Porque
And secondly,
también es un honor
because it is also an honor
entre
to be
los compañeros y
amongst
compañeras de Sudáfrica, del
the
pueblo
South
sudafricano,
African comrades
a lo largo de la historia,
that throughout
de la historia
history
reciente,
and
ha tenido
in recent history have also had a tremendous trajectory that is known worldwide. So viva the South African people.
Reciban un saludo de
Please
mi
receive
organización.
warm greetings from my organization, the Committee of Peasant Unity. We are an organization from a small country in Central America and Mesoamerica that holds two identities. We are an organization founded by peasants, and we are also part of La Vía Campesina, and we're an organization made up of indigenous people. And we were born 45 years ago, and there was a war of 46 years that took place in my country 46 years ago, and the comrades in the Committee of Peasant Unity give their fraternal greeting. It is really tough to be the last person because I know that folks are tired, but now that I see the clock is ticking, I will do my best to summarize what I would like to share with you all and the experiences of our struggles, and also break it down into four main ideas. The first idea is that it is necessary for us to change our narrative. Throughout history, there have been a series of ideas and concepts that do not help us understand the nature of what we're living through. For example, we talk about climate change as if this is the most natural thing, that every so often the climate changes on the earth. And worse than that, we are told that we need to adapt to that climate change, as if we can not do anything under that situation. Those ideas, what are the roots of the crisis that we are living through? And that can help orient the struggles that we need to wage. Now, this does not mean that we need to negate the reality. On the contrary, the magnitude and the depth, the breadth of the changes that have occurred recently make some folks say that that this needs to be called the Anthropocene, which means this is a period in the geological timeline of the Earth that is related to the human impact on the global lifespan of the planet. This is a topic of discussion, because when one begins to think about when that change started, some place it with the beginning of agriculture 10,000 years ago. However, what one cannot negate is the fact that in the mid-20th century, there were a series of indicators that went off, right? So we're talking about greenhouse gases, the destruction of the ozone layer, the loss of forests and biodiversity, flooding. And when we ask ourselves, what happened in the mid-20th century? And what set it off? And we realize that one of the elements that occurred was that halfway through the 20th century, the monopolies and the big multinational corporations grew. And this world is dominated by the multinational corporations and the monopoly economy, who do not hold the interests of human, but of capital. And it has been through that accelerated growth that those indicators, went off, and they say we don't have to talk about the Anthropocene. If not, we should call it the Capitalism, or in Spanish, Capitalismo. It's an era marked by capital. And that's why, for those of us that come from indigenous peoples and communities, when we speak about the environment, it's difficult for us to really have a grasp of what is really being stated, because for us, what we're really talking about is life. We're talking about the common interests of life, and that's what's at risk. And if we're speaking about the environment as something apart or external to humans, what needs to be modified and transformed is our understanding and our visioning of what's taking place. What is at risk in these moments is the possibility of survival as a species. And that's not something that I'm saying. That's what Comandante Fidel Castro said in one of his reflections. And moreover, actually, in 1983, Fidel Castro wrote a book called well, I invite folks to read the book that was published, where he really outlined the dimensions of the crisis that we're living through. Many people say that Comandante Fidel had the capacity, the ability to travel to the future and come back. But in 1983, he wrote the book where amongst other things, he said that never before had humanity had such an ability to produce from the laboratories and production chains. There was a very short time in between them. There had never been so much misery either in the world as well. And there had never been a time prior where humanity as a species had been at such great risk. It is necessary for us to assert the fact that if capitalism is predatory, there is no possible solution to this crisis under capitalism. The only solution is through socialism. But it doesn't have to be a type of socialism where we replicate the mode of civilization that
lo que ha sido la experiencia de los pueblos originarios, lo que ha sido todas las formas de relacionarse con la naturaleza. Y por eso cuando estábamos
that is why when we're organizing this conference, right? Because it doesn't just have to be the environment. The topic is the defense of the common interests of life and recovering the ways that we have a relationship with Mother Earth. Because we are all children of Mother Earth. We are the sons and daughters of Mother Earth. And those are some of the elements that we need to begin to recover of this vision that a series of indigenous peoples throughout history have maintained. What should be the relationship between humans and Mother Earth? And this relationship is found in many elements that indigenous people live. When the comrade spoke about corn, and in the legend of the creation of the Maya people, it says that humans were formed by corn, made by corn. 4 different types of corn. White corn formed our bones, red our muscles, yellow our skin, and black corn our hair. And in this legend of the creation of the world, that deep tie with Mother Earth and humans is established. And so some of the things that we acknowledge that need to change is that we need to change the narrative that places us as something external to the environment, or whatever one wants to call it. We are part of an equilibrium that needs to be recovered. We need to contribute to Mother Earth. We need to understand that human life is not possible if we do not change that relationship. The second idea is that we need to make visible who the protagonists are in these struggles. When we say, what can the working class do to unite or to push the struggle in the defense of the environment, right? These are, now we're not calling it, we're not going to have a Greta Thunberg, this person from the Nordic country that made themselves famous. Our struggles are collective, and we understand that very well, that it's led by the people, the working class, indigenous people, women, that are in the front line of struggle in the defense of the common good of the earth. And when we see all throughout the world, there's a series of struggles that have to do with the defense of seeds, the struggle for water, the struggle in mining, that has to do with all of those elements that work towards the interests of the common good, and those at the center are the working class, indigenous people, and women as the main protagonists in this. And what happens on many occasions is that who has appropriated or have co-opted the struggle, but the reality is that, once again, I have to affirm, is that, women are at the forefront, and we need to understand that those struggles are being waged already. This is not a future thing. The struggle is now. The third element, the third idea that I want to share with folks is that there is a series of limitations that the struggle faces. One of them is that these feel struggles that have a sense of urgency, right? That affect the daily lives of people. It is difficult from our context that we're looking to reduce parts per million of what is contained in the gas and in the air, or the struggle to reduce 1.5 degrees of the temperature. No, these are struggles for things that are much more concrete. However, many times those struggles that are quite difficult, that are against the big multinational corporations, that are against predatory corporations, this is at a problem at a system-wide level, and at the root of the problem is capitalism. It's that capitalism by nature is predatory, and it will not be possible we will not be able to stop this crisis unless we change the system. And for that, some of the efforts are to highlight who struggles for the defense of the seeds, who struggles in defense of the earth, the water, and those who, anyone that struggles in defense of that common, in the defense of life. And so for us, these are the principal limitations that we see, and that these daily struggles, these permanent struggles that are waged in all parts of the world, are at the root struggles against the system. The other element is, what can we do when facing this situation? There are 2 or 3 ideas I'd like to share. One of them is that it is necessary to push a series of concrete practices. Again, the comrade spoke about agroecology. This different mode of production that is not industrialized agriculture, but it is the production of agriculture that is backed by science, by movement, by concrete practices, that has been developed by peasant organizations. It is a demonstration that it is possible to do things differently, not just through monoculture crops or through agribusiness, a different mode that is yielding results. This is what I'm talking about when I'm referring to some of these concrete practices. The other element has to do with the narratives, not just speaking about the environment, but speaking about the struggle and the defense of the common good of life. But apart from that, it is very important that in these struggles, we can push that actually many countries have been effective in doing this, is how to place limits on the veracity, on the aggressiveness of capitalism. And part of what we can do to establish those limits is to establish tools and instruments that we can use to face those big multinational corporations. For example,
because the appropriation of the UN, of the peasant workers, of those norms, of those international tools or national ones that can serve to limit the aggressiveness of capitalists. Another example is also the judgments that have been developed amongst organizations or amongst people who belong to peasant organizations or indigenous people and who've been successful, or those symbolic judgments where we can judge the environmental crimes of capitalism. This is an element that it's not a solution, but it starts to limit the aggressiveness of capitalism. And fundamentally, is the fight for the common good of nature, is make folks see that it is a struggle that is tied for the fight, with the fight for socialism, but not socialism that's going to continue the patterns of consumerism and waste that we live now, but a socialism that recovers the relation of human beings with Mother Earth. And that's why I say this, as I mentioned a moment, we need to internalize that all of us are children of Mother Earth. And what corresponds us is to fight for land, for motherland, and for socialism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, comrade, on your input. I was just reminded by a comrade over there about the assassination of Thomas Sankara on the 15th of October, which is yesterday. So, viva to Thomas Sankara, viva! Viva! So, comrades, because of time, we're going to just allow 3 or so comments. We ask you just to please keep it short so that we can break on time. And thank you to the interpreters for your patience. We're not necessarily going to answer all the questions, so we'll just do the comments. Can I ask the people that are speaking to kindly introduce yourselves and the organization that you come from?
My name is Hazem. I am from the Iraqi Communist Party. I live in Germany. I wish to talk about the issue of water. We are suffering from water shortage in Iraq. We have 2 great rivers, Dijla and Furat. And these 2 rivers are known in Gilgamesh battle, when in the south of Iraq we used to have big lakes. Iraq at that time was called the Black Land. This means that the land of Iraq was very fertile, and we had millions of palm trees at that time. The dictator Saddam Hussein have destroyed all of that when he launched war against Iran and when he occupied Kuwait. And you know the American intervention that happened in 1991 after the occupation of Kuwait, and that made Iraq under an American and UN embargo that the Iraqi people suffered from. After the fall of Saddam and the invasion of the US into Iraq, and who became the de facto rulers through the puppets in the government, that in a system that it is based on sectarian division. Iraq is known for its dependence on these two rivers, and 70% of the agriculture and water resources going to the agriculture come from these two rivers, who start from Jordan and Iran. What happened is that Turkey built lots of dams, including the Alisu Dam, that affected many villages and monuments in Turkey. This led also to shortage of the two rivers' water. Iran also has actually built dams on the pathway of the river. Therefore, we only receive 30% of the water supply, and this is not sufficient for water supply, drinkable water supply, and agriculture. That is why we're seeing a huge exodus of farmers and peasants from their lands to the cities, to the major cities, and this is adding strain. The Iraqi government is not seriously speaking about this. They are not deploying diplomatic efforts in order to ensure Iraq's quota of water. Therefore, we know that this government, that it is based on sectarian division and is filled with corruption, needs to be we need to struggle against its actions, and we require your solidarity in our struggles against the Iraqi government on this matter. Thank you very much.
My name is Johan Tobar. I come from Unión Comunera in Venezuela. I want to say hello from the Venezuelan communes to this People's Assembly. We want to revindicate as commune people the fifth historic objective of the country's plan that our commander Hugo Chavez presented to us when he had his last glorious war in his fight in 2002. The plan of the country is a plan to navigate, and this manages the resistance of the Venezuelan people. There in the fifth historic objective, Commander Chavez revindicated that one of the greatest tasks of the Venezuelan people was to preserve life and species on the planet. This, of course, inspired us as a country profoundly, and in joint with the Bolivarian government, we began to found in our communes common recycling schools. These schools are like socialists and citing Chavez. These are experimental processes that have been giving way to recycling business and on communes. There, the people organize themselves in terms of their culture and their own codes, and they're managing the waste on the territory.
Estas empresas son de la comuna, son propiedad comunal.
These companies and these businesses are property of the commune.
Avanzados de reciclaje como los vemos en Noruega.
In comparison of like more advanced recycling efforts like we see in Norway. These companies, these businesses are healing our land, and they're creating to reforest and then they give way to centers of receiving for recycling.
And that waste that is generated that does not go to the initial destination, go to recycling spaces that often are tied to the bourgeoisie. That plastic is converted into plastic wood, and with that recycled material, playgrounds are made, and it is also used in agriculture. And this is what we're talking about, a communal, circular economy in the hands of the people. And it has forced us to create deep moments of education and reflection, and these are what our communal schools are. With this, in our case, we avoid the further contamination of the rivers and the waters, and perhaps these projects don't capture the amount of CO2 that we would like, but we continue to learn as a people in the struggle around climate change. Additionally, this allows us to denounce what the capitalist class does in the global north. Additionally, it allows us, as Comandante Chavez said, that we are not changing the climate, let's change the system. Thank you.
My name is Comrade Maheta from Unite, Lesotho. I had a couple of questions for Mviwata, but they are not allowed. But I hope we can continue this conversation after. About leptin gelarin editing inside GMO, also about endocrine disruptors from GMOs. But then here's my take on the commercialization of water. In my country, as we speak, we're having a hydrogen deal from. Don't laugh, brother. But we're having a hydrogen deal from a certain. Okay.
Ahmed, if you could just speak louder, we can't hear.
Can I take the mic off? Is the commercialization of water. In the 80s, in the 86, our country sold water to neighboring countries, but it's kind of interesting that 70% of our people don't even have that water in the streets, in their homes to clean and stuff. But as we speak, the country is also embarking on a hydrogen deal for clean energy to export to other countries while the country can't even feed itself. It becomes bad because it is usually said that it is clean energy, climate change, it will be better for other people, but what about us, the people who are living there in that country? And then we also have the seed problems in my country where Mviwata comes in, which we would like to have a conversation about it, when preservation of organic food, and also on prices when it comes to organic versus GMO, and also when it comes to the taste of food based on the GMO and the organic differences, and also on the health of people who eat organic versus people who are into GMO. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, comrades. Okay, we're going to take one more comment.
مساء الخير رفاقي الأعزاء.
Good afternoon, everyone, comrades. I would like to indicate one very important point related to nature. Maybe we have overlooked this point. The biggest methodical devastation of nature in the world happened in the occupied territories of Palestine. We have examples on this. There are thousands of settlements that have been established on fertile Palestinian territories and lands. And this meant that the lands who are destined to farming and to agriculture became lands dedicated for cement and for buildings, settlements. This is one point. The second point, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians moved from agricultural production to service the sector. Also, the natural resources have been attacked. There is a methodical attack on all of the water sources in Palestine. Al-Hula Lake has been dried out, and also other water resources are being destroyed by the occupied forces. There is also an illegitimate use of energy supply coming from the Mediterranean Sea, which is from the left side in the territorial water affiliated to Palestine. In addition to this, the weapons used by the occupying forces are causing toxic emissions like white phosphorus that has been used in many occasions and in many wars, and in the bombardment against Gaza Strip. The occupying forces did not only displace Palestinians from their lands, but also devastated the natural resources of Palestinians. Thank you.
Thank you very much, comrade. As we draw to a close, sorry that we couldn't take questions. I think as we interact in the seminars, all these questions can be, spoken about in the bilaterals, etc. We're hoping that you can do that later on and throughout the conference. As we come to a close, I'd just like to thank the panelists, Comrade Theodora, Comrade Tindeka, Comrade Hussein, Comrade Carlos. Thank you very much. And just a reminder for all those that are delegates for the feminism seminar, you can keep your devices. It will be held here. Everybody else, please return your devices. Just want to give this gift. From Cape to Cairo, from Morocco to Madagascar, from Cape to Cairo, from Morocco to Madagascar, Tanzania, Israel. Ngepazuka Tanzania Israel so ithatha ngepazuka to